Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Today, I want to take you to Paducah, Kentucky, a bustling town located near the state's northern border with Illinois. Here, in the spring of 1864, most inhabitants of Paducah, which included, in addition to the citizens, Union soldiers, and military hospital medical personnel, including the Army nurse pictured here, Maggie Egan, considered themselves relatively safe from rebel attack. The city seemed far away from the front lines. There were plenty of soldiers, plenty of supplies. Everything seemed to be safe and secure. But any sense of security they felt turned out to be false. Everything changed on Good Friday, March 25th, when Nathan Bedford Forrest's Confederates appeared out of nowhere and stormed the place. As rebel raiders poured onto the grounds of Military Hospital Number 1, they tore down fences and sent sharpshooters up into the hospital to the fourth story of the building. Inside the hospital, all hell broke loose as those who were mobile scrambled to get out. They included Maggie. She came face to face with a rebel soldier. Halt, the soldier commanded as he leveled his musket in her direction. She had no choice but to obey. He led her away, picking up another nurse in transit as they left the building. The soldier took them out into a field near the hospital and then set them free. By this time, the sharpshooters that had moved up to the fourth story of the hospital busied themselves by picking off Union soldiers who were holed up in the nearby forts. The Federals responded by lobbing artillery shells to try to get rid of the Confederate sharpshooters. Maggie and the other nurse were caught in the middle between the Union artillery and the Confederate sharpshooters. How they managed to survive while the bullets and the shells whizzed and flew over their head was something of a miracle. While all this was going on, a rebel officer rode up and asked them how they came to be in such an exposed position. So they told him. Maggie told the story. The officer suggested they lay down in the field to avoid being killed, and then he left the scene. Soon, another Confederate appeared, and Maggie's terrified sister nurse told him she thought her time had come. That Confederate looked at her and said, "You should always be ready to die." Maggie, it's not the first time she was in a precarious position. She'd come into the world 26 years earlier in another unusual place, a ship on the Atlantic Ocean. Newborn Maggie, along with her Scottish father and Irish mother, landed in New York and settled in northern Illinois in the town of Lockport. Maggie grew up there with her younger sister named Ellen. When the war came, they both became nurses under the auspices of the U.S. Sanitary Commission. In October of 1861, Maggie and Ellen reported for duty to the post hospital at Jefferson City, Missouri. Then, in January of 1863, the sisters parted ways after Maggie received orders to report to Paducah, and there the medical authorities assigned her to the surgical ward of Hospital Number 1. It was located in a warehouse that had been converted to a hospital. Her patients included casualties from the Vicksburg campaign that was still ongoing. The war literally landed at the front door of the hospital a year later when Forrest's Confederates, it's about 1,800 of them, at least that's the reported number, raided Paducah for supplies and attacked the garrison, the Union garrison, which numbered about 650 men, and they were all at Fort Anderson. Maggie recalled the scene after that rebel who talked about getting ready, we should all be ready to die. She remembered what happened and she wrote about it when she was with that other nurse in the field. She later wrote, quote, "We were so frightened that we could tell nothing about time. Nearby us, a cow was grazing. A ball struck her. She jumped high in the air and, with a loud bellow, retreated in good order. We momently expected the same fate, but in spite of our fears, we laughed at our strange condition. This was my first experience in raid or battle. Soon we saw the rebels retreating, loaded with plunder, but they also carried many dead and dying men. Among the lifeless body of General Thompson, covered with blood." End quote. The general that Maggie described was Colonel Bert Thompson. He was one of the commanders of the raid who had practiced law in Paducah before the war. He had been seated on a favorite horse in sight of his home when struck by Union artillery fire from a gunboat, one of the gunboats that were close by, the Paducah or the Pawpaw. They were located in the nearby Ohio River. Maggie continued her narrative, quote, "As we were moving off the field, a rebel carrying a flag said, 'Have you many Yanks?' 'Yes, sir,' I replied. 'Reinforcements are coming down the river.' This was repeated and passed along the line. 'Reinforcements are coming.'" End quote. Maggie made away with others and escaped across the river into Illinois. She said, quote, "We were not allowed to return until the next day. Then it was to learn that the hospital with all its contents had been burned." End quote. That was her official report. Other buildings in town had also been destroyed. Maggie was reassigned to another hospital and remained there into the summer of 1864 when she went home on a furlough. She returned to duty in October at another general hospital in Jeffersonville, Indiana. Here, she met and fell in love with one of the hospital's stewards, a man named Alexander G. Weed. He had been promoted to the position of hospital steward from the ranks of the 24th Wisconsin Infantry. The couple married on April 11th, 1865. Maggie and George, who became a druggist, made their home in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin after the end of their military service. They remained in Beaver Dam until 1871, when they joined a group of about 70 men, women, and children in search of a better life. They were known as the Northwestern Colony or Wisconsin Colony. They migrated to Kansas, settled in Russell County, and founded the town of Russell. In 1883, the couple's only child died in infancy. 8 years later, George suffered a heart attack and succumbed to its effects at age 53. Maggie lived on, passing time with a local ladies' club and the Order of the Eastern Star, a Masonic organization. By this time, a former nurse who interviewed the widowed Maggie noted, quote, "She is now gray and inclined to live in the past and think over the scenes of war times," end quote. Maggie lived until 1914, dying of heart failure at age 76. So there's the story of Maggie Egan Weed, a nurse during the Civil War who happened to be in Paducah, Kentucky when Nathan Bedford Forrest's raiders took the place, captured the hospital, and burned it down. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail.